Untersberg. This is the final talk of the June-July series, which is focused on a selection of some of the books by Franz Hartman that were recently published by the EUST. Hartman has expertly woven many of the complex themes and ideas that he raised in those volumes into this delightful and magical, yet thought-provoking satire. His characters embody ignorance and ego, a desire for knowledge and higher spiritual awareness, having to face the light and darkness of their own human existence when encountering purer entities living in harmony with nature, and the consequences of their meeting for all. What misleadingly appears to be a simple tale has veiled layers and depths that show Hartman's evident personal experience with the entities he describes, as well as the wealth of knowledge so apparent in his writings. My talk today is divided into 3 parts. The first part takes a look at Hartman, his views and interests. The second considers the source for his inspiration for writing the satire. And the third part looks into the satire of an adventure among the gnomes. And I hope that you will all enjoy it. Franz Hartman was a very knowledgeable, multifaceted man. We know he was a medical doctor, theosophist, occultist, geomancer, astrologer, and more, as well as being an established author. He was curious, with a sense of humor, and generous in sharing his knowledge with others. He always stressed the importance of personal experience and investigation in one's search for self-awareness and higher consciousness. Authors often write about what they know, imagine, or have experienced, adopting settings and characters that are familiar to them. They may draw upon the habits, mannerisms, and mindset of particular people they have encountered in life or local history, to bring their characters to life and raise themes and issues that take the reader on a journey towards reflection and greater awareness. Familiar locations can also be borrowed and adapted to purpose. This is what Hartman did in his earlier satire entitled The Talking Image of Aurora, which was also published by the EUST as part of the Lucifer collection, The Blavatsky Years, Volume 4. Aurora is a hilarious portrayal of events and people in the Theosophical Society of that time, and the character representing Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, as well as other leading personalities, and the Society for the Distribution of Wisdom, are easily recognizable for Theosophists today, as they are rather well known. Therefore, I would like to take a moment to share some of Franz Hartman's thoughts to help provide some keys to understand him a little and what made him tick before delving in today's satire of an adventure among the gnomes. Where better to begin than with a glimpse into his thoughts and motivations in writing his previous satire, The Talking Image of Aurora. It was published seriatim in Lucifer, December 1888 to February 1890. On the title page of the American edition, Hartman wrote, open quote, "If we wish to know what life really is, we must look not merely at its surface, but into its depths. We must hold it as it is, and not merely admire the picture which we have formed of it in our imagination." Close quote. In the preface, Hartman wrote, open quote, "It was written with the sole object of showing to what absurdities a merely intellectual research after spiritual truths will lead, if one has not the spirit of truth and holiness with one's own self. The story represents the vain struggles of a soul for light, and how at last the truth came to it without any struggle. Thus, in attempting to show the difference between true spirituality and sophistry, or between true religion and what is most properly rejected mysticism, spiritism, and metaphysical speculation, I believe that I am rendering a service to the cause of truth. The author, close quote. In an open letter to the press about the same book, Hartman wrote, open quote, "The story represents the adventures of a theosophical Don Quixote who seeks for wisdom everywhere except in the right place. Finally, in the last chapter, he discovers that true wisdom cannot be found anywhere except by the attainment of the knowledge of self." Close quote. So, was Hartman influenced by the stars? He was into astrology, was he not? Hartman was born under the last fire sign of the zodiac, the 9th, symbolized by an archer that is half man and half centaur, a Sagittarius, therefore, as Scorpio ends on the 21st of the month. According to astrology, this would indicate a dynamic combination of a quest for knowledge and curiosity covering many pursuits, an intense passion and adaptability, a geographical intellectual with an interest in spiritual adventures. This meant that he would go where others feared to tread, to explore, investigate, and learn in a search for knowledge. He would push boundaries and dream big, certain that hard work and perseverance would help him achieve his goals. Jupiter, his ruling planet, also endowed a high-level intelligence to one who could learn and develop in new environments. And I would say that this was certainly Hartman to a T. We know that Hartman was an associate of Helena Petrovna Blavatsky and chairman of the board of control of the TS Adya. He published the journals Lotus Blüten and the New Lotus Blüten, writing an impressive body of articles and books on a range of theosophical topics, including yoga, astrological geomancy, alchemy, philosophy, the Rosicrucians, Jacob Boehme, and Paracelsus. He was interested in Buddhist, Hindu, Islamic, and Persian writings, as well as Christianity and mysticism. His inquiring mind and extensive travels around the world brought him into contact with various kinds of occult phenomena, which he investigated thoroughly and took note of. His opinion was that personal experience far outweighed what could be gleaned from a book. Through his experiences, he became more aware of elementals, nature spirits, and the realm of nature. His open attitude and lively curiosity may be what attracted occult phenomena and personal encounters to him at certain times of his life. In a brief introduction to the life and works of Franz Hartman, MD, by Robert Huttwell, which is included in the volume of An Adventure Among the Gnomes, is an excerpt from a letter from Master M, dated December 25th, 1883. Open quote, "Blessings, were we to employ in our service a man of no intelligence, we would have to point out to him, as you say in the West, chapter and verse, i.e., give him special assignments and definite orders. But a mind like yours, with a background of much experience, can find the way by itself when given a hint in regard to the direction which leads to the goal." Close quote. Let me add a curious note here. Hartman has a spiritual message being delivered on a gust of wind in An Adventure Among the Gnomes. Let us now consider the setting Hartman drew upon in the writing of An Adventure Among the Gnomes. because the book's subtitle is An Occult Tale of Adventure in the Untersberg. Like Paracelsus, Hartman spent the last part of his life in and around Salzburg, so I would imagine he knew it well. The Untersberg mountain is the northernmost massif of the Berchtesgaden Alps between Germany and Salzburg. The Untersberg is steeped in myth and legend. Some call it the mountain that eats men. It is considered a sacred place of power with supernatural events happening frequently. People that have disappeared for decades turned up with no memory of where they had been or what had happened to them. There are accounts of encounters with dwarves and giants and strange lights floating in the air. For the locals, the mountain is home to earth spirits, fairies, witches, wizards, and magical creatures of all sorts. The iconic opening scene of The Sound of Music was filmed on the Untersberg as they sang, "The hills are alive." However, back to myth and legend and the Untersberg caves. There is an extensive cave system of over 400 caves that extends deep beneath the mountain. And the caves are also connected to strange and mysterious tales. The Dalai Lama calls this mountain the sleeping dragon, and there are many myths involving time portals, lost people, and dwarves and gnomes living within the cave system. One legend relates how a wedding party with a musical band went missing for 100 years, for them all to return unaged. One local legend relates how Emperor Charlemagne is asleep within the giant marble caves in the bowels of the mountain with his knights. On occasion, they awake and send out a knight to count how many ravens are circling the mountain. If the answer is 24, the emperor will ride out for the final battle against the Antichrist or whatever great evil is facing the nation. However, another inhabitant of the caves are the gnomes. The word gnome, or Latin gnomus, or the Greek approximately gnomes, is thought to have first appeared in a book by Paracelsus entitled A Book on Nymphs, Sylphs, Pygmies, and Salamanders and Other Spirits, published posthumously in 1566. He said gnomes were 2 spans tall, avoided people, and could move through solid earth. Alexander Pope wrote about the gnomes in English in The Rape of the Lock in 1712. His source is quoted as being Comte de Gably, 1670, a satire by Nicolas Pierre-Henri de Montfaucon de Villars, who wrote, open quote, "The earth is filled almost to the center with gnomes or fairies, a people of small stature, the guardians of treasures, of mines, and of precious stones. They are ingenious, friends of men, and easy to be commanded. They furnish the children of the sages with as much money as they have need of, and never ask any other reward of their services than the glory of being commanded." Close quote. From the 19th century, gnomes have also been termed as little people, elves, goblins, brownies, leprechauns, etc. Whereas in music, Mussorgsky, a Russian composer, composed a beautiful movement called Gnomes, portraying the sound of the gnomes moving beneath the ground in pictures at an exhibition in 1874. And this can all be found thanks to Wikipedia. There is also a castle near Salzburg. Hartman must have been very familiar also with this imposing emblem of Salzburg. At an altitude of 506 meters, it is the largest completely preserved castle in Central Europe. The initial fortress was built in 1077 by Archbishop Gebhard, with additions by his successors to protect the principality and archbishops from enemy attacks. In 1500, Archbishop Leonhard von Koitschak had further construction carried out, which created the complex as it is today. However, there is another castle that Hartman could have drawn inspiration from in the writing of this satire. This is a medieval castle ruin in the Czech Republic at an altitude of 670 meters on the Tolsten Mountains in the Lusatian Mountains. It can be traced back to 1337 and was owned by the Württemberg family until around 1402, when it was sold to the lords of Duba. It changed several owners, including Saxons, until it was burned down in 1642 during the 30 Years' War and was never rebuilt. But you may ask, why is this of interest to us today in this talk? Well, Burkhard von Tollenstein. Let's keep in mind this branch of Bohemian noble family of lords of Duba, with extensive estates in the Czech Republic and Saxony in Germany throughout the Middle Ages, because it is with a Burkhard von Tollenstein that we now truly begin our adventure among the gnomes. This is volume 1 of the Franz Hartman collection, first published in English in 1895 in London. The EUST 2022 edition, has 200 pages. The preface by the editor, a description of the frontispiece, list of contents, a brief introduction to the life and works of Franz Hartman, MD, by Robert Hutwell, and then we come to an adventure among the gnomes proper, followed by an appendix of the autobiography of Franz Hartman. The actual text of An Adventure Among the Gnomes comprises 8 chapters. The introduction, which is chapter 1, In the Dragon's Den, Within the Untersberg, Among the Gnomes, the next chapter continued Among the Gnomes, Lucifer, Digging for Light, and War. It has 12 illustrations in black and white, and I shall try not to give away too many spoilers. Chapter 1 is the introduction. The introduction presents us with the backstory and the 3 leading characters, and I borrowed the images from internet. We are told in the introduction that in ancient times, the castle of Tollenstein sat on a hill in a forest close to Salzburg. Today, the massive banquet halls are only a weed-infested ruin, but witnesses claim to see and hear the ghost-like shapes of long-dead ladies and knights, some of which had attended the light-filled lavish festivities, while others had been cast into a subterranean dungeon to starve and die in darkness. The owner of the castle was a certain Burkhard von Tollenstein, a youthful and valorous knight, admired by all of the maidens because of his long mane of golden hair, except for the fair Julia von Horst. One sight of her dark, languishing eyes had been enough to capture his heart, but she refused his advances, saying, "Of what use will be your heart to me if starvation waits for me in your home?" So, in desperate need for riches and spurning all warnings of doom, he rides into the forests of the Untersberg to seek gold from the gnomes who reside there. In fact, he encounters people, the king of the gnomes, who after suitable warning offers to exchange a bag of 1,000 florins for a single hair with its root from that golden mane of his. I will say no more of the terrible events that followed, because all is revealed in the introduction. However, it ends with the following paragraph, open quote. And now the excuse for writing the following tale. If this story of Burkhard of Tollenstein had never been exhumed from the archives containing the family histories of the ancient knights of the Duchy of Salzburg, the following chapters would never have been written. For it was the discovery of these reliable documents which recalled to my memory the history told to me by my now deceased friend, Mr. Schneider, who was himself a participant in the adventure which I am about to describe. End quote. So we move on to chapter 2 in the Dragon's Den, and it is here that we are introduced to the first characters. Professor Thomas Cracker, a great skeptic and a member of nearly every scientific society in the world. He knows everything without taking the trouble of looking at it. He has a theory for everything, and he is short and plump. Then we have the Reverend Jeremiah Stiffbone, who is a clergyman. His congregation has given him enough money to travel in search of the truth that could not be found at home. He can quote from almost any book to support almost any opinion. Yet he holds no set opinions and changes his views every day. And he is tall and thin. We have Moses Abraham Scalawag, Esquire, a commercial businessman. And though he does not support the existence of gnomes, goblins, etc., he thinks that if the story of Burkhard von Tollenstein is true, it could be worthwhile to look into the matter of the gnomes as gold. There is also a guide to carry instruments and provisions, and he is a direct descendant of Lazarus Gitschner, who actually spent 10 days among the gnomes in 1529. Mr. Schneider, a young and vigorous man, very familiar with the mountain terrain, was also invited to join them, and it is he who narrates the events he experienced. However, he later presents himself under a different name as he remembers a past life. The dialogue of these gentlemen as they proceed up the mountain is as follows. Mr. Scalawag: "Confound these gnomes. Is it worth the while to climb up to that den and waste our valuable time in disproving that such animals exist?" Reverend Stiffbone: "Gnomes are not animals, but imaginary beings. Paracelsus describes them as being intellectual forces in nature, whatever that may mean. They are about 6 inches in height, but able to change and elongate their bodies. Mr. Scallywag replies, but how can you determine their height if they are merely imaginary? You may just as well imagine them to be 1,000 feet. Professor Cracker replies, rot. That was his favourite and usually only expression. The group arrive in front of a cave entrance, and Professor Cracker has a spiritoscope which he positions in front of the entrance. Instead of looking directly at a thing to see it and examine it, this scientific device produces a series of reflections from 4 mirrors. And as the men discuss here, there is nothing to see. But at that moment, a puff of wind delivers a note written on paper, which says, O foolish mortal, by dull senses bound, within thyself the spirit must be found. Know thou thyself, and by self-knowledge know the lives above and in the world below. In every sphere, each being knows its own. To spirits only, spirits can be shown. And at this point, there is a burst of energy and they lose consciousness. The narrator wanders away from others in the cave who lie on the ground unconscious, and he is drawn to singing coming from a higher plane of consciousness. And the song goes, oh, what is this secret longing welling up within my heart? Unknown powers surging, thronging, rendering solid rocks apart. Newborn joys and dying sadness, bursting clouds and opening sight. Something whispers, full of gladness, this is love, is life and light. The narrator comes across Princess Adalga, daughter of the king of the gnomes. Here, strangely enough, he forgets his present life as a Mr. Schneider, but remembers himself from a past life as an Irish tailor who believed in nature spirits, and so he introduces himself under that Irish name. He and the princess are both overwhelmed by their emotions at this meeting, and they fall in love. He is amazed by the powerful sensations, but realizes that gnomes are born from pure emotion, and they cannot disguise their emotions in any way. All gnomes have a ball of light with a fiery center over their head, and the color and purity of that light corresponds to their character. So, good gnomes have beautiful shapes, while wicked gnomes appear to have distorted ones. Gnomes can dissolve their form into the ball of light above them and thus travel wherever they want to at will. The narrator is presented to the king of gnomes. After their initial conversation, the king decides that while the new arrival might think he is a man, it is an illusion, as he has no control over his emotions or body, because when this man is stuck with a pin, he jumped and squealed, and so he must be only a composition of semi-intelligent forces of nature. The narrator has to fight against the influence of a mechanical monkey, to which he is obviously a servant. And to show he is a man to be respected, the narrator tries to teach the gnomes logic and how to lie, because gnomes do not know what a falsehood is, as they are all spirit and conscious spiritual energy. The narrator uses philosophical discussion to make the gnomes question everything. He tells them that truth can only come from science, and that is the only path to achieving greatness. They all become very curious, and they all want to achieve greatness for themselves. Adalga is afraid of all of this talk, but she wants to learn more as well. She tells the narrator a nursery story about Lucifer, who knows, quote, that which is not and does not know that which is, unquote. The narrator convinces her to take him in search of this Lucifer, and they end up entering a labyrinth to find the mythological temple of Lucifer and hopefully the truth. But things do not go the way the narrator thought they would. Throughout this book, Hartman is a master storyteller. He weaves theosophical teachings along the path that humanity faces in its progression towards higher consciousness and self-awareness, amusing and shocking the reader at the same time. From the initial wonder and beauty of discovering the hidden world of gnomes, he shows the destructive forces unleashed by ego and pride. However, hope and perseverance are the keynotes in this story. And when all seems lost, it is nature that steps in with the greatest wisdom, with the language of flowers and the language of nature itself. I would like to close with 2 verses of the message delivered by nature in the final chapter, and hope that you all enjoy reading and discovering more of this wonderful volume for yourselves. We are the spirits of the voice of truth, symbols of beauty, harmony, and youth. We teach thee wisdom from the sphere above, if thou wilt listen to our song of love. Without the darkness, light cannot be known. To know truth, falsehood must be overthrown. Peace without effort would be death to thee. Naught but the battle leads to victory. So thank you all for listening to An Adventure Among the Gnomes by Franz Hartman, available from Amazon, and I hope that you all enjoy it definitely as much